less logo, more logo. That MK in the circle, we took off the bags, so she wanted it back on the bags. And I think a lot of things that happen is brands don't stay into the core of who their consumer is. Yes, you have to grow that customer database and get new consumers and all customers. But if you alienate her or him, or they don't understand what's going on with the brand as a total, I think that starts, consumers are very smart today. They have more avenues of being able to hear about things, see things, whatever.
Hi, and welcome to Handbag Designer 101, the podcast with your host, Emily Blumenthal, handbag industry expert and the handbag fairy godmother. Each week, we uncover the stories behind the handbags we love, from the iconic brands and top designers to the creativity, craftsmanship, and culture that define the handbag world. Whether you're a designer, collector, or simply passionate about handbags, this is your front row seat to it all. Welcome, Matthew Lafargue of the Accessory think tank to Handbag Designer 101, the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Finally made it work, right?
I know. Listen, you have been on my hit list in a good way because you have worked in handbags for a kabillion years. That's my latest word, kabillion.
Yeah.
Let's just dive into a ditty called Matthew. Where did you start? Because I know you were at Michael Kors for a long time.
Yeah. I actually started on the selling floor at Macy's as a sales associate at Macy's Stamford, Connecticut.
Do you think that's why you understand what you do so much, truly because that's your roots?
Well,
front-facing.
To be quite honest, I was a kid that never knew what they wanted to do, I mean, I wanted to do everything and wanted to do nothing really. And nothing really, I always was very envious of, when I was going to, even in boarding school and in college, kids that knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to be a doctor, they wanted to be a lawyer, whatever. I was like, I just didn't know. But I do know that the minute I hit the selling floor, there was something there that I couldn't figure out what I liked or what I didn't like, but there was something there that was really intriguing to me. And I'm a people person, 100%. And there's really very few people I don't like. So I think that, or that I can work with type of thing. So I think that, and you think of today's, and even then, service is really, I think, is king. And if you're offering that service to a customer and you're able to fulfill something that they want or they like, and you're helped to access that, I think that that's magical. And so I knew that right away. And I had a lot of great mentors along the way. I started my career actually at Macy's in cosmetics. So, there were a lot of great mentors. I still have my department manager's business card. I still have that business card. And I will be ever indebted to Sharon and the Robert Chavez. I was at Macy's at the time. And, I always visioned myself one step ahead of where I was. So if I was the business manager, I was the department manager. If I was the department manager, I was the assistant buyer. And, I think that helped propel me because I had no background in, I didn't go to like a school for merchandising or anything like that. There were a lot of those programs. Like there was management training programs that really did that for, I think, a lot of people. And that's obviously fewer and fewer because there's not as many department stores and, retail outlets as there were then. And so I think I understand the customer better than maybe most. And I think that was key. And I was always open to listen. I think you can always, if you don't listen, and you don't really, go to the middle of the mall and that tells you who's there. That's what I used to say. Go to the middle of the mall, sit there and watch the customer. You can think who it is, but that's where you actually really see who's walking that mall,
Retail anthropology, how and why we shop, watching. Right. It's true. So you were at Bloomingdale's, and I know you were at Michael Kors. Talk a little bit about your experience.
I was at Macy's. And then, so I was at Macy's for 10 years. So I went through, I started out as a sales associate, and then I was at Macy's. I was an assistant, a department manager and assistant buyer. and then a group manager. And then bankruptcy occurred. And I went from
That's a monkey wrench.
Macy's to A&S,
Oh my God.
where I was an associate buyer in dresses.
Uh-huh.
And then A&S went on the planning and allocation system. So I was the last person in. So I went off to business or to planning. And I was in petite sportswear. I mean, I've done every FOB you possibly can think of, pretty much. And then, but while I was at Macy's, I worked in handbags. I was an associate buyer in handbags. And to be quite honest, I hated handbags then. I didn't really get it.
Why did you hate it?
Because it was an era that everything, I called it mark down everything. We bring it in, we mark it down, and I was in bridge handbags, which, rarely wasn't where the business was, but I learned a lot. And I had a boss that was really tough, and she was a legend in the industry, and we're really good friends today. And it taught me, to appreciate things. I think a lot about, being an assistant buyer in those days, it was very competitive,
Very.
and you weren't in the right area, whatever. And then handbags weren't on the trajectory that they did go into. So,
Can I ask you something though?
Yeah.
You said it was marked down central. Do you think those handbags at that time, because I don't know how much has changed, what made handbags so marked downish? Was it the style? Was it the price point? Was it the product? Because if it was just understood, whatever was like it as a buyer, you see things, you're like, this is not that. Why are they doing this? I see this on the daily that, okay, people aren't touching it. People will only buy it once it's marked down. What was it, a pricing issue? Like, because handbags, as we all know, is it's a unique item in that there's no sizing, right? You get what you get and you don't get upset. Like, that's it. Like, it serves its purpose. It's a fully functional vessel. So the customer knows what they're getting when they buy it.
Well, I think it's not that their customers didn't need handbags then. I think it's also in those days, if you can recall what Herald Square was, it was all case line. You were not able to touch it for the most part. The better portion of the bridge portion of the business. And once again, I don't think we had enough sales associates to service the customer at that time. And then handbags, every FOB, it's all cyclical. I also was a dress assistant buyer when you couldn't give away a dress, it was, I was always one of those, like, when I left the area, it exploded. But look at the dress business the last few years. It's been amazing. But I think also, handbags had a very, very, very long run of unbelievable growth. And if you think about how stores changed the footprint of where handbags were, they went away from case line for the most part. It was accessible. There were shops. There were all these things that made it more exciting. It's also what went down the runway, what the focus was, because it's all comes from the top down. I thought, it's all trickles down. And I think that was the key. And then I always say when it's a crossbody trend, it's not really great because the margin is, it's the same margin as you're dealing with a bigger bag, because it's not like everything shrinks. You need the same components. But, and I think then it became about the designer sneaker, and I think it's just how I always say when it looks important, it is important in a store. I mean, yes, there has to be demand and there has to be some type of branding and all of those things, but the average consumer comes in and she looks or he looks, and they're very educated today. But if it looks, I shop that way. If I think it looks important and I like it, that's what it is, And I think that that's really key. And I do believe that there's headways that have been made in handbags the last couple of years. But the bags, when big bags come back, the business will be back. That's my opinion,
Really? So, because I love that we're jumping around, because I've spoken about, certain telltale signs that if the bags are very, very sturdy and very structured, the market is very, very tight because people don't want a loose bag. They want everything in its place. When the colors are very safe and neutral, because you and I know that to put color into an assortment, you can't charge more for the 2 hot green, hot pink pieces, right? Because the customer won't pay more. However, it's costing you more on the back end because you're not scaling and you're not going into production for those units. So as a brand, if you have more color in your assortment, then chances are the brand is doing better. Handbags are doing better because you can then afford to take those risks. I never thought to think that the bigger the bag, the better the market, the better the shopping. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's also the consumer's lifestyle today. If you picture it, she used to have a tote. She used to put at least a wristlet, maybe a smaller bag in there. She, and whatever else she was carrying, if she's a commuter or sneakers that she's commuting in or whatever, and now not just even the whole COVID era, but customers work from home, need what they necessarily used to need. It wasn't as big a part of your wardrobe. I do think that people going back to work in offices and corporate life and all of that stuff will change things. It's like career dressing. I mean, who dresses career wise? But if you're a career resource, you have to figure out how to kind of change maybe the traditional thought process on it all. And I do think that at Michael Kors, I oversaw U.S., Mexico, every portion of the world, more or less, at one point or another. But, I used to oversee a very large volume on an annual basis of handbags and footwear. And I think we have gotten so used to looking at spreadsheets and data and all of this stuff. And a store or a sales associate can only sell what you give them. Can't sell anything more than that. So, and I used to say to, especially the business planning wing, who's really looking at numbers black and white a lot of times, is tell me where the gray is. I don't need to know what the black and white is. It's already printed out on that paper. But where is that gray? Where is something that we can bite into, that we can either not exploit, but increase that thing, the amount of units that they get, and versus always being black, brown, tan, cream. I mean, it gets a little boring. And when you think about it, the consumer walks through a store, whatever speed that she walks through, and you're trying to get her attention. And if there's not a sales associate sitting there who can maybe pull them over, then the only thing that's going to get their attention is something that, they see at the corner of their eye and go, oh, I want to look at this. And I think that it has to be enough of a visual presentation that you can draw them in there. I mean, Michael Kors, much of our business was a replenishment, believe it or not. And so therefore, the nice thing about replenishment is I didn't need to have 42 pieces in the back to, do something. I think of how things are allocated, all of these things, it's not, you can add in some of that splash or, something that really attracts the consumer, because without it, I think it's boring. I think part of what's gone on lately in the market is it's been kind of boring.
It has been boring.
It's nothing that's exciting. And I think
were you at my
goes different,
go
people
ahead.
get safe, people get safe. Retailers pull back, all of those things. You can only, ship in what you get in a plan. For your receipts. But I do think the willingness to try things and to listen is, I think, really key, no matter where we are in life. And I think that's what we need to be doing a little bit more than just being so dictatorial, saying, no, it's this way, and just this way. How do we don't try something, you never know.
If you ever wanted to start a handbag line and didn't know where to start, this is for you.
Living proof that independent designers can make it big.
Emily Blumenthal is one prime example.
If you had dreams of becoming a handbag designer and didn't know where to start, this is for you. If you have a handbag brand and are in need of strategy and direction, this is for you. I'm Emily Blumenthal, handbag fairy godmother and handbag designer expert, and this is Handbag Designer 101, the masterclass. Over the next 10 classes, I will break down everything you need to know how to make, market, and manufacture a handbag. broken down for you that you'll not only skip steps in that handbag building process, but also save money in that learning curve. For the past 20 years, I've been teaching at the top fashion universities in New York City, created the Handbag Awards, and also the Handbag Designer 101 podcast. I'm going to show you like I have countless brands from sketch to sample to shelf, whether you're just starting out and don't know where to begin, or even if you have a handbag line and just need some strategic direction, the Handbag Designer 101 Masterclass is just for you. So let's get started, and you will be the creator of the next It Bag. Join me, Emily Blumenthal, with the Handbag Designer 101 Masterclass. Were you at Kors when the notorious retail glut happened, when Kors took over all of department store space?
I started in 2004.
Oh, boy.
And I was there through 2019. So, yes.
Oh, my.
I was a big part of that. I was there. So it was an amazing, amazing time. And I thought what was really great is that I've worked for the CEO, John Idle, for quite some time. And some of the things that, it was very entrepreneurial and it was amazing. And it was and my boss, Anna, who I worked for a very long time, it was a magical time. And all of handbags were doing well. But, we, as anything, when it started going bad, I used to say we caught a cold and they caught the flu because there was so much into the Kors business that it was, it was unhealthy in many ways. We're too big of a percentage of the total. But it wasn't like we were trying to make it in. I mean, it just was naturally kind of done. It was a phenomenon that was amazing. And it was an experience of a lifetime. It really was. And
I think very few people could say that they were part of a brand that was just selling, like units upon
being
units.
A cab going to work, and everywhere I looked, it was someone was carrying a Michael Kors bag. But the big portion of that business started with the watch, that the gold watch. We called it the boyfriend watch that every college kid had on their wrist. I mean, I still have 3 of them. It was an amazing thing, and it was amazing. It was a great time. But, the market was a little turbulent at that time. It was like 2008, handbag market was many of the mainstays of department store business was not doing well, so we were the kid on the block that was. So it was great. But we had a lot of great strategies, and we did our own, shop managers, which were our employees, to assist and to train and to educate the staff that was there, which made a difference because they were the brand representative. That was, maybe everybody saw Michael on Project Runway or knew of Michael Kors, but they were that touch point that they were the ambassador to the brand. And, took the time to explain to customers, what were the Michael's must-haves and why was it this way and that way. And I think that it still all comes down, in my mind, to service. It's all about service. And I shop in places that might not be the designer store on the block, but I go to places that I'm going to get service. That at least nod and acknowledge that I'm present, and I'm not somebody that wants to be, smothered with a bunch of help, but I do like that personalization. And I think it's all about personalization.
It's especially with where we're going. I had a program that made it to the very top of Macy's. It was an independent designer program to pilot bringing new products in, like independent brands, but recreated at Macy's price points. And it made it all the way to the tippity top. And the said VP DMM, and, Macy's was so funny because it was, what's that British show where the upstairs, downstairs, where they had the people down that, like, the buyers were sitting in cubicles surrounded by boxes, and the further higher.
Yeah.
The higher up you went, they had offices, they had lights. It was just, there were no boxes to be found.
No, yeah.
And anyway, she had said, it's a great program. Our customers will love this. However, our floor staff is not meant to educate. They are there solely to ring up. It will not succeed here. And I think that speaks volumes, like specifically along the Kors line, because there were a lot of, back in the day, I'd call them Michael Kors soldiers. Like, Coach had people that you knew would always show up. They were so hands-on with always making sure with their shop and shops that everything was merchandised, that the floor staff knew the product, like they were so well educated. And then there were the Coors people who they were like boots to the ground, like that's it. They knew their job, they knew their business, they were there not to play. Do you think because it was Coors by Michael Kors, and then there was what Michael Kors would put down the runway was very different from the MK brand. Do you think you're not part of it. You can see things holistically. Do you think there's a takeaway that someone who's growing a brand can say, here are some best practices, here are things not to don't get too big for your britches kind of thing? Because there were so many little points of the tree that it was okay, there's Michael Kors on Project Runway, but the woman who's buying it from the outlet in New Jersey with the logoed bag, they are, these two are not the same.
That's a very difficult question to answer. I do think that, I think what was great about in the beginning was, and I was just on a call with a client that I have had with chat, where I work today, is
the Accessory think tank.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I should call it the Accessory think tank. Nobody calls it by chat, but I think that, what was one of our advantages in the beginning was she saw the bag, she looked at the bag, she opened it up, and she said, and she looked at the price point, and it might have been more than she was, thinking about spending, but she didn't feel that she was walking away being taken advantage of, that there was intrinsic value in the bag. Well, no matter what that was, if it was about the details or an extra compartment or, who knows. So I do think there was that component. I do think that we also had the advantage of Michael being on Project Runway at the time and all that stuff. Long term, at the height, I think I would have 500 and something people report directly into me or indirectly to me. The majority of that team was really field team between shop managers and our field district team and our brand coordinators. The focus, we made an investment in the field because we knew that was going to help us execute and educate and also look like that we were clean on the floor and, all those things and look, shiny and new. I also think that we went through many fixturing iterations, and I one time said to, and my CEO, John, made fun of me because of my Southern accent. I would say, I just want it to be a beacon of light. It just needs to be a beacon of light. And I think our shops were the shiniest and the beacon of light on the floor. And like I said, it looked important. And that was I think that is a big hurdle. But I also, what the downfall or the level is, we were so big. I oversaw $1.8 billion of wholesale. So,
Jesus.
That's bigger than most companies ever are. And that was just the U.S. and my responsibility. That's between footwear and handbags. But the majority of that was handbags. You should continue to climb. How high can you be? And I also think that there was decisions that were made. We were at the time, the millennial thing came about. Then it was this one and that one. And how do you recapture? Then everybody was complaining that, we looked like the sameness and all of those things. And we tried a lot of strategies, less logo, more logo. That MK in the circle, we took off the bags and she wanted it back on the bags. And I think a lot of things that happen is brands don't stay into the core of who their consumer is. Yes, you have to grow that customer database and get new consumers and all customers. But if you alienate her or him, or they don't understand what's going on with the brand as a total, I think that starts, consumers are very smart today. They have more avenues of being able to hear about things, see things, whatever. Do I think the off price versus the full price portion of the business really did anything? I think expansion of outlets, in my opinion, it was difficult. I also think that handbag classification took a turn south versus north, and it was very, very competitive at the time. And stores were trying to retract.
Mm-hmm.
and you have to have stock in order to do a business. So it was a lot of those things. It was the levelization of the handbag, that classification. But, still today, Kors is a huge business. So it's still, the total business might be in a much more healthier place than it was. But I do think that there are still, iconic shapes. And I also think that, we have the collection business, which I think that brands should really focus on their halo because that gives the whole thing.
And for those who don't know, what's a halo for that matter?
Like would be their collection business, the more designer business. I think and Michael was big, and the ready-to-wear business was much bigger than the collection accessory business, but all of that type of thing, because we first were branded Michael by Michael Kors, then we went to Michael Kors. So there was a lot of confusion, I mean, I think there was, and I don't, just like, do I believe the customer, oh, that's a Lauren bag or a Ralph Lauren bag? I think she sees Ralph Lauren. She doesn't really, I'm not a big thing about labels, but I do think that, I think there were things that we could have done better. I think that we did a lot of amazing things and really changed the industry in many ways. And, what comes up goes down, and what goes down comes up again. And I think it will happen. But I think there has to be some excitement. There has to be a reason. It's like, when the watch business went south, but you never saw a watch ad anymore. Was it really that she didn't want to wear a watch anymore? It was the phone, or was it nothing was inspiring to her?
Right. And now at the Accessories think tank, you and our beloved Nancy Foreman work with the best dynamic duo on the scene, I must say. Do you, based on your collective retail experience, which is clearly hearty, what are the things that, with all the things learned, touched upon, that you're able to incorporate with working with smaller brands, independent designers? Because the biggest issue that you and I know is that these brands don't have budget. And if they do, it's not a lot, right? They don't. And, it's, as somebody who lives off of working with brands like that, it's to go from working with a role of perma replenishment to, okay, we got to be scrappy, clever. How can we get that same kind of strategy? So what are some takeaways that you incorporate working with these smaller brands that actually can work based on their limited budget with all your years of experience?
Well, I first of all think you have to understand my background was always with big brands. I've worked for several different big brands, and I always knew that it was a struggle for little brands, new brands to come onto the marketplace. I had not a clue. I didn't even understand how hard it was. And I don't think that there is a better champion than Nancy Foreman for little brands and, young designers. And she will go the 150 yards beyond what is needed. But, I think it's almost impossible. I mean, not even from the retailer perspective, but also the manufacturer's perspective, because they have to have a certain amount of units. They have to have all these things, and because it doesn't make a minimum, and the cost of doing all of that. And the worst thing that you can do as a young brand is do all of that and do have all that inventory, and then it doesn't sell. And then you're bogged down in dead inventory and I swear, no matter where that store, it reproduces, it's like it has babies. And I think that, it is really, really difficult. And then I sat there, and when I first joined the organization, I was like, well, if you don't have any inventory, how can you sell? So I was going at it this way. And Nancy's, no, we got to have small units and you can grow into them. And all of those things. So I think there is a happy medium. I think you have to have an advocate like a Nancy, or an organization that you're working with, or if you have that ability on your own, that you have to understand you cannot spend all your financing or all your, budget up front, because the production of it all, even though it's a pain in the ass and it's hard and it's really tough, the real challenge comes the minute that you start shipping. And can you help where you need to help if something isn't working, or how are you going to market that brand that you're going to continue to want the consumer to purchase it. And if you can find great partners in a specialty store or, a department store that can build upon your brand and is advocating for your brand because they see the long-term possibility, then that's ideal. But, I think everybody also thought, time of COVID and all that, oh, well, I'll just have a, direct to consumer business, not knowing how difficult it is to capture a consumer on direct to consumer. I mean, it costs so much money to get that customer in your database. So
Customer acquisition cost.
Yeah. I mean, it's absorbent, and it's like, and I also think that anybody that's in this business or wants to be in this business has to think long term. They have to be hungry for it. It can't be, okay, it's this little pretty project and, it's not selling. Well, what am I going to do? But I do think, you have to, you're never going to have enough money. It's just what it is. Because it's an ever consuming, changing, fickle industry we're in, and trends happen and come and go. But I do think that you have to be positioned and understand that in order to fund future production and to do all those things, you have to have that sale. So you have to, how you're going to do that, there's a lot of creative ways, but I do think that that's the one thing that is missing. I don't think a lot of brands think after. They think once it's done and, it's going to happen. And it's just as hard on the other side. So you either have to have somebody help you with that. We offer those services. We do a wide range of services from, design concept to sales strategy and management. Post-life, I say, or post-birth, I say. But it's also, and that's what I do. But we're involved in everything. But, I also sit on a lot of the design portion of it too, because that is where I get to know and understand the brand DNA and what they're trying, to do. I think it's just as important as just the sales side. Just like I think that somebody's in more product development needs to be in the sales side because they then can see what the struggles are,
Right.
But I do think, it's a balance to everything. And I think the willingness to try things different, there's a million ways they say they'll skin a cat or whatever, try to do things. But it's really difficult. I sit there and listen to Nancy and I go, I don't know if I could do that, like saying to factories, we need, this, we don't need this. But she's, developed a nice network out there. And I think that's, so like I said in the beginning of my career, I had a lot of mentors and all that stuff. You kind of have to have that no matter in every facet of life, I think,
Yep. Matthew, I think we can wrap up with that sage advice you just shared. I think designers are super fortunate if they have the opportunity to work with TAT or the Accessory think tank, to work with you. And Nancy, how can we find you, follow you, and if we're a designer, have this opportunity to try and talk with this dynamic duo?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person, but I mean, Matthew at theaccessorythinktank.com or Nancy at theaccessorythinktank.com. And I know that we're on Instagram and Facebook and all of that stuff, but LinkedIn, you can get us through there, all of that stuff. Yeah, it's people like you and organizations that we've worked with that, we have, what's really nice is part of our thing when we meet with new clients is have them contact other people that we've worked with. And it's really that word of mouth, which I think is really important. But yes, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. And the accessorysthinktank.com, and it's Matthew or Nancy. And at either, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I should know better, shouldn't I?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and review and follow us on every single platform at Handbag Designer. Thanks so much. See you next time.